Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Leadership Lounge, where we have conversations with business leaders from all walks of life about how and why they are successful. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Dr. Leadership Show. Hope you're having an awesome day. Hey, I am super stoked today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. On the Leadership Lounge today, I have a gentleman by the name of Lee Povey, who is the founder of Lee Povey Coaching and has had a very interesting life. Co-founder and president of Empower Therapy in 2020 as well, but did a real nice long stint of almost 13 years as the head coach and director of performance cycle coaching, which we're going to talk about as kind of the speed cycling for Olympians and world champions. Going to get into that today, but leads this coaching phenomenon of a company out of Southern California. Super excited to have him on today. Lee, how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm wonderful. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. And just for the audience, he's in Southern California where the weather's always good. He's out for a little peaceful walk this morning. So if we hear, a horn go by, it's because it's the ladies just letting him know that they think he looks great.
It's probably more likely going to be my dog, Raya, who is a husky German Shepherd mix, and she is the prettiest dog you've ever seen.
That's awesome. So I had a husky. How long ago was that now? About 30 years ago. And mine was a redhead. Sadie was her name. Wow. Yeah, so I had kind of the collie red, and they are beautiful. So does she have the blue eyes?
She has, kind of white eyes, really, whitey blue eyes.
Wow.
She's 70 pounds. She has the intelligence of the German Shepherd. She has the stubbornness and the endurance of the husky, so she's a bit of a pain, actually.
And the molting and the shedding of both, I suspect.
She definitely sheds.
Yes.
Luckily, her coat isn't actually that long or thick.
Yep.
But she's just ridiculously athletic and has a stupidly high prey drive. So she's great with humans, kids, other dogs, but squirrels and cats, yeah.
Well, hold on tight. Oh, they're beautiful dogs. I got fun. We'll talk about the fun dog stories later. But hey, I do really appreciate you joining the show. And what I kind of wanted to start off with people is, as you can hear from Lee, he's from England originally and has been in the States for quite some time. But I typically start off with kind of tell us how you got to today. And I know the cycling came into play, and then COVID kind of blew some things up, and then you changed directions and put this overall life coaching and leadership coaching thing together. But tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today, Southern California in the U.S. Tell us your journey a little bit for a minute, and then we'll dig in.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. I think if we want to go right back, as a young man, I was always very driven, very competitive, loved sport, did a multitude of sports at school, captain of the school rugby team, swam for my county, and then I discovered track cycling. And where I lived in Brighton, which is a reasonably small city, we happen to have a velodrome. In fact, the oldest velodrome in the world. And the main reason that became my sport was because my father, that was his sport. Very cool. Talking of my father, my dad would be clinically diagnosed as a sociopathic narcissist.
Wow.
So pretty much incapable of caring for anyone other than himself, and everything was about him. His life was created around him. So he wasn't particularly present. He was off doing a ton of womanizing and whatever he wanted.
Yep.
Didn't really take the role of fathership particularly seriously. And, now I understand he didn't really know how to. His brain didn't work in that way.
Yep.
So, as you mentioned, I kind of stepped up into that leadership role for both myself and the family very young. My mum recounts a story of I was 8 years old, we were on holiday in Italy, and I'm directing her like, this is how we're going to get all the bags off of the trolley and up the escalator, and I'm like, you do this and you do this.
There's a new sheriff in town.
Exactly. I've always assumed this role of leadership, but I didn't understand what it is. It came naturally to me, and it was actually a protective mechanism for me to be in charge, because then I felt safe. I didn't really understand what it is, and I've now spent the rest of my life trying to understand what is leadership, what does it mean? Mm-hmm. From there, I was an athlete when I was young. I was on the national team, but realized I wasn't quite world class. I was good national class, but I wasn't going to go and win the Olympics. So I did what many young people do who don't have qualifications, because I didn't go to university, but you're smart, you get into sales.
Yep.
So I did real estate for 12 years, 6 years for a large corporate company, kept getting promoted, thinking, oh, this is good. They keep giving me more money. And then opened my own company. And kind of 6 years into having my own company, I realized I didn't like it at all. I'd just been caught in this wave of success, but it didn't bring me any fulfillment.
You weren't getting the joy out of it. Yeah.
No, I didn't like it. I just was successful. And I thought as a young man, that's what life was about.
Yeah, you're supposed to be miserable being successful, right? Yeah.
Well, I kind of was. So
yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
I was miserable for the corporate agency. So I left that thinking, well, if I do it for myself, it'll be better. And it really wasn't. And I was at the European Championships. I'd started doing some cycling coaching for fun at this point. And an athlete that I was working with was competing in European Championships. I'm sitting in the stand with his dad, watching him race. And I said to his dad, I don't want to go back to my office. I'm done.
Wow.
6 months later, I'd sold my business and I got incredibly lucky. I sold it in December 2007. The big property crash happened in the UK in
what
January
timing, huh?
2008.
Wow.
So I got lucky. I mean, I could see it coming, but there's still a huge amount of luck in that.
Yeah.
And then I spent 6 months going, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
And was chatting to a friend of mine. I was like, right, I'm going to do property development. Couldn't do that. The market was in free fall.
Yeah.
Wasn't the time to do it. So I went full time into cycling coaching, which was something in my life plan I thought I was going to do much later once I'd retired as kind of a passion.
Yep.
Now this turned into my business. So I spent, so this was 2008. That's when my cycling coaching business started. And then I sold my own private business during COVID. And before that, I'd become the national team coach for the US Olympic Development Program. And I did that for 3 years until COVID came. And then everything closed down during COVID. And I had
especially in SoCal. especially in California.
Oh, God, everything.
Yeah.
The velodrome was closed for 18 months. So we couldn't train for 18 months in the actual track. So I had that big life reset moment again, where I said, okay, what do I really want to do? What's going to bring me the most joy?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was listening to a lot of leadership podcasts and psychology podcasts. My wife's a psychologist. We have the marriage and family therapy business together. And I thought, I want to do something that impacts more people rather than elite sport is great, but you're only impacting a very small amount of people at one time.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to have more impact for good in the world. And that's how I came across leadership coaching.
That's awesome. Now, I rode some similar experiences. First of all, I was married to a sociopathic narcissist for 19 years. It took me a little longer to figure it out. Tongue in cheek, if my daughters are listening, still love your mother, but man, they know what I'm saying. And found a wonderful woman and about 15 years ago, and it's been an incredible ride. Chose much differently. But then the other thing is I had a construction business, and I was on the bad side of the market too. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, and I've touched on the show before. If you're failing forward, you're succeeding, right? And I was moving forward. I decided to build on the side. Everyone was making money doing it, and I had, a couple $3 million properties up when the bottom fell out, and suddenly and thank God it was a hobby, right? But so that was a tough time, but. So you called it, is it the Melodrome? Is that what the track's called?
Velodrome.
Velodrome.
French word.
Okay.
So the British equivalent or the English equivalent is a cycle track. So the French word for it is velodrome. And the sport, primarily cycling is a French sport. It's their national sport.
Yeah.
So a lot of the governance is in French. So the original document's in French, and then they get translated.
And this cycling is kind of the sprint cycling, right? For those to get a picture of it, it's the high-banked curved track, if you've ever watched the Olympics. And I want to make sure I'm saying this right, so correct me where I'm wrong. And there's a lot of strategy to it. A lot of times they ride real slow and then go clear up to the top and then do the hold, right, where they're turning their wheels and holding themselves, and then someone takes off. And it's just – so there's a lot of strategy to that game as well, right?
So that's one of the things that attracted me to it in the beginning. I was a really good swimmer, and swimming's so boring. You swim down.
That's right.
You see the little T.
You turn. That's right. Time for your turn. Yep.
Swim back up. At most, there's some pacing in it, and that's about the strategy in it. And I was a sprint swimmer as well. Obviously, I'm a sprint athlete, so there wasn't even really any strategy in that. So while I enjoyed the physicality of it, it didn't mentally stimulate me. Whereas track cycling is one of the most technical and tactical sports you can actually do as a solo person. especially as a sprinter. You take 100-meter athletics. Again, it's technique. You get your technique right, you're the fastest person, you're going to win.
Yep.
Track cycling, you can be the fastest person and not always win if your opponent rides the race better than you. So I loved that element of it. That really excited me. And it excited me in coaching it because it's a complex sport to coach.
It's just an amazing sport to me. I don't watch it often. I catch it in the Olympics always and watch it and just how fast they actually go. Now,
God, yeah.
You coach some Olympians and some national champions as well. Any names that would be recognizable to the crew out there?
Well, I just spent the last weekend go-kart racing with my friend Ryan Owens, who got a silver medal in the Tokyo Olympics.
That's awesome.
As the starter of the team for Great Britain.
Uh-huh.
And then I worked with probably my greatest coaching achievement was actually coaching other coaches. And I worked with the Dutch national team coach during that same Olympics, and his athletes won almost every event on the track.
Wow!
So that was it. I was watching the final of the sprint, team sprint. So
yep.
3 riders, each team riding opposite sides of the track against each other. Fastest team wins. And I obviously had Ryan on one side of the track that I'd worked with for many years,
and the Dutch guy on the other.
The Dutch team on the other side of the track that I was currently working with. And I was like, who do I cheer for?
Yeah, you're going to have to get the dual jerseys like, I don't know if you watch American football much, but Mrs. Kelsey, when the Chiefs play the Eagles, she had the split jersey. It's hard to pick a squad. But
yeah. So I felt like a winner that day. Whatever happened, didn't matter.
Wow, that's just awesome. What a great experience. What do you think has that you've been able to take from the coaching of the track? So you spun off, and in 2020, COVID made a lot of life changes for a lot of people, right? The positive thing is more businesses were formed in 2020 to 2022 than had ever been formed in a 2-year period ever in the history of this world.
Wow, that makes sense.
Because of all the entrepreneurship that needed to take off, people needed to find ways to make a living, right? And but what do you think helped cross over out of the sporting world into your executive or leadership coaching in the business world?
I mean, probably really my dad. I'd spent so much of my life having therapy myself, being in men's groups, being obsessed with psychology for 2 reasons. One, because as a young man, I knew I didn't want to be like my father, but I didn't know
how
what
to
I
be
wanted
right.
to be like.
Yeah,
because I didn't have that strong, clear, decent male role model in my life. My dad didn't really have friends. He had people he kind of used, but he didn't have friends.
Yeah.
So I had to discover mentors, and that led me to men's groups. And I did that as a very young man. I was the youngest man in my men's group, and even then, I still assumed leadership roles. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how to be a leader. It came naturally, but I didn't know the skill of it.
Right.
And there's so much skill to it. So then I just started studying it because I wanted to be a better leader and I wanted to be a better man. Plus, I recently discovered I'm autistic, which
and you fought some
sense.
Dyslexia, I think, too, in the learning progress.
So the autism and the dyslexia definitely affected me at school. The message I got at school was, "You're super bright, but you're lazy." And anybody that knows me as an adult would.
That is not the case. Just the limited amount of time I've known you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not lazy. I just didn't know how to learn in that system. I need to do a lot of talking to learn. And I can get stuck if I don't understand something and if I can't have somebody explain it to me. So the way I learn is different from many other people. And back then in the schooling system, I'm 52, they didn't really know dyslexia or understand it or autism.
That's right, yeah.
And which is why both of these have been diagnosed so late in my life for me, but they explain a lot. So as a young person, because social cues didn't come as easily and as naturally to me as they did to other people, I studied people intensely. I studied, how should I behave here? How should I act here? Because that wasn't as natural to me as it was to other people. And it's just given me this lifelong lens of studying human beings and interactions. And I've always been fascinated and just kind of drawn into psychology and why do we do the things that we do?
It's so funny because that was the note I had here is why do people make the choices they do? Right? There's old sayings, we make choices and choices make us. Your father made choices that made him.
Yes.
We've made choices and that made us. And And then, of course, when you have things that are impacting you from these learning impacts, dyslexia and autism and things of that nature, everyone's got the capabilities. It's just you got to find how to get the capabilities to turn on. I truly think that everybody really can do. Well, first of all, I believe everybody can do better than they're currently doing. Everybody can improve self. That's why I started the podcast. That's why you do what you do, right? Is trying to show people that you can do more. Push yourself a little bit. I do this to keep my sanity. I lost my father to Alzheimer's. I wanted to keep my brain going. You and I spoke. I just recently retired from 36 years of corporate world and doing some of this and some consulting and just got back from Asia speaking and those types of things, staying fresh. And that was my message when I was over there is I'm coming over as an American, right, into the Asian market. I got 13 countries over there. And I started with, listen, you may come in here thinking that there's nothing that this American can teach you. Maybe you don't like America. I don't know. You don't know me. I don't know you. But until you get your mindset right, this is either going to be a great week for you or a really crappy week, right? And it's up to you. You got to get your mind right that, first of all, realize I can improve. I need to improve. I'm willing to improve. If those things are answered yes and you mean it, then we're going to have a great week. I'm going to learn from you. You're going to learn hopefully something from me. But why people do what they do, the psychology of it, is what makes leadership kind of fun to me. I always said I was a psychologist by association, right? When you lead, I had, around 1,500 people that I either directly led or led through influence, the service side of the organization, the technical side of the organization, then all the sellers, which I had direct responsibility for. There's 1,500 different personalities there. And you're constantly absorbing it. And you and your wife working together, that's great that she's a psychologist. I'm sure that helps you in your new endeavors as well.
And just, the conversations that we have, the ability that I have to share things with her and get feedback, and her community and her friends that, and now my friends that I get to ask questions from.
Yep.
The stuff that she'll send to me, the stuff that we'll send to each other. We're just thinking about human beings. And I like to think of it kind of more as freedom rather than being better. I like to think of it more as you get more choice. The better you understand yourself,
excuse me,
the better you understand why you behave the way you do.
And think the way you do.
And this can be, this can be the emotional responses that we have to everyday life and the triggers and the things that happen to us. And then we strip that away and we look at, what was the genetic personality traits that you were particularly born with? How did the world meet you? How did you then respond?
Nature and nurture.
So you might have been you might have been a really curious kid, and there's many ways that the world can respond to that. Your family system might have been, oh, wonderful, here's some books, go study this and go find out what interests you. Or your family system might have been, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, I'm really stressed, I don't have time for this. Please, you're too much.
That's right.
So that message you got was your curiosity
was not good.
You is too much. And you adapt yourself because of that. And then we move into adulthood. We're not in that family system, the school system anymore. We now have more choice about how we want to show up, but we're still working with this old programming. So I love helping people strip that old programming away, create new programming, create more choice. And then I find from that's what allows people to be more effective. And that's the word I like to use is, how do you want to be your most effective self? And from that comes the most amount of fulfillment.
I agree. It's a great way to look at it because, again, you can have fun in it or not. Your attitude is dictated by the choices you make as well, right? That you can either...
And the choices are made by your attitude.
That's exactly right. It's a cycle. That's where I was going is it's a circle of life, right?
Yeah.
I always use the analogy. People say, well, how do you not make mistakes? Well, you learn how to not make mistakes through experience. How do you gain experience? By making a lot of mistakes. They're tied together. Making mistakes is how you grow. Remembering not to make those same mistakes again or avoiding the same mistakes again as often as possible is that experience and that wisdom or whatever you want to call it. Yes. And wisdom is different than knowledge. Knowledge is knowing tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. That's just how life
I love that
works.
One. I'm gonna have to remember that one.
Yeah, and it's stolen, and I can't remember. I'm trying to remember who the guy was. He was I think he's an Irishman. He might have been a Brit, But he was talking, God, I think he was a rugby player. And he said that, and I go, oh, that's going in the all my stuff's stolen, right? I don't have an original concept anywhere. But yeah, he was like, knowledge, they were asking him about, is it knowledge or wisdom that help you succeed or whatever? And he goes, knowledge and wisdom are very close to each other. And then he dropped that knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is perfect.
Even the concept of failure, I don't really look at life like that anymore. It's choices, and then what do we learn from the choice?
Yep.
Because I think, well, especially as high performers, what we tend to do is we tend to have a fear of failure because our standards are so high.
That's right.
We don't want to make mistakes. And I can give this an example of my own life. In the local track that I raced at, I was the fastest guy. I didn't lose a race for something like 8 years in a sprint event.
Wow. That's domination.
There was this track was shaped in a particular way that's unusual. It's 580 meters round. The typical tracks, as you described at the Olympics, are 250 meters. They have lots of high banking. They're made from wood. They're indoors. This is outdoors, almost flat. You had to ride it in a particular way. I'd then go to these indoor tracks, and the tactic that worked at my local track didn't work at these other tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of me experimenting at the local track and risking losing, trying suboptimal tactics, but understanding how they worked and what happened, I didn't want to lose. My ego didn't want me to lose.
That's right.
So it took me taking a step back and going, I need to lose at my local track to win at the bigger events.
Yep, makes sense.
Was a mind shift. And once I had that mind shift, I realized the only person that cared about me winning or losing at the local track was me.
Mm-hmm.
No one else cared.
That's right.
That's no one else even really noticed.
And you have, and fear of failure, I talk about a lot because you are correct. I carry a fear. I think most successful people do have that. That's their drive, right? That's the will do. There's two types. There's a skill set, which is can do, I call it. And then there's the emotional intelligence and the personal drive. That's the will do. And that will do is driven by the fear of failure. And when you talk about different races and different times in life, use horse racing as an example. There's only been a few Triple Crown winners because every one of those races is different. And how do you get a horse that's being ridden by somebody else, and sometimes a different jockey each ride, to learn how to handle that track? And then there's wet conditions, dry conditions, fast track, slow track. You have all these things that come into play, and life is like that. What you're good at today, I was in the technology business. What was the technology that we were selling 15 years ago? We aren't what we were. We aren't what we are. We have to focus on what we will be. I used to say that a lot. And you got to be looking at the horizon, not the windshield of the car. When you're in life, you have to look at where's it going. Gretzky, great line. Skate where the puck's going to be. That's how he scored so much. He was always a second ahead of the defenders mentally. Where do I position on the track? What's what's that move going to be that allows me the opening at the net? Whatever. And I'm not a hockey guy. I'm making it up as I go along. But I think that willingness that you discovered on how to be better was to not be number one for a while so I can be number one again at a higher level. You got to allow yourself to kind of take a breath and take a lick or two to get better. That's just how life works.
Yes. I'm just disassociating from the outcome. So one of the biggest changes for me was realizing that all that mattered was the process. The outcome is somewhat irrelevant. The outcome will take care of itself.
It comes naturally. That's correct.
The process is right.
Mm-hmm.
And that got particularly honed into me in 2010. I crashed. I broke my shoulder very badly. It was a week before the national championships. I was a defending national champion. And it made me realize my own vulnerability. Before then, I was definitely the hero of my story. I thought I was invulnerable. I'd crashed before, but nothing had really happened. And then suddenly, bang, I broke a bunch of bones, had 2 reconstructive surgeries, inoperative pretty much for 7 months in between these surgeries, couldn't use my arm properly. And it made me really reevaluate my life. It made me evaluate how I showed up. It made me evaluate how I asked for help, and made me realize how terrible I was at asking for help and support, because I always wanted to be the one that was okay. So my relationships were one-sided. I was a hero.
We're fixers, right? It's the mantra too. Yeah, we're fixers.
I loved the fixer role. But it wasn't healthy for me. And part of what came out from that was realizing that sport was a privilege, that I got to do this. I chose to do this. And when I was attaching my success and my happiness on an outcome, I was I was negating the steps that it took to get there. I wasn't enjoying the journey enough. So I struggled to train, especially by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had this shift of it's all about the journey and the result will take care of itself, I enjoyed competition so much more. And I got to competition in much better condition. Actually, the fastest I ever was when I was 45 years old in 2018.
Isn't that
And it was
crazy?
because I'd optimized everything. I had this incredible training group of guys that I'd created together. We had so much fun. And the national championships, I won the British and US national championship in the same year, first person to ever do that. And
That's amazing.
and this is age group racing, so
Sure, I
this is
understand, but
masters racing.
that's
So
unbelievable.
yeah, and the races themselves were almost like victory laps from everything I'd done to get there. And I just felt incredible and it felt so effortless. And I fully enjoyed it instead of in a passive and stressful because I was so concerned about the outcome. I genuinely at this point didn't care about the outcome. I just wanted to perform and I
Mm-hmm.
trusted that my body and my training would take care of itself and I would get the result that I deserved. And that was such a huge shift for me. And that's how I worked with my athletes and that's how I work with my founders. And, you know, one of my founders, we've worked really hard recently. He was relating to his business as this burden. I'm the founder. This is my sick baby. I have to look after it. It's this incredible stress. And the moment he stopped relating to it like that and started relating to it as this is a privilege, I get to do this. So few people
Mindset.
get to found
Oh,
a
yeah.
successful business.
That's right.
And since he's had that shift, the whole entire company has changed because, as we all know, the founder is the person or the leader is the person who sets the tone.
The
And
leader sets
we're
the pace.
role
That's
modeling.
right. That's right.
We're role modeling every moment of the day from our own being. And if our being is showing up, even if we're not saying it, but our being is showing up, oh, I don't enjoy this. This is too much. This is stressful. Everybody else is going to pick up on that and repeat it. If your being is, wow, this is such a privilege and I love the opportunity I have here and I love the challenge and the choice that I get here, that's just going to flood to everybody else as well.
Fear and confidence can be picked up on very quickly by people. And that's why you train and that's why you practice. So your confidence is high. Your confidence becomes a wanted endeavor from others. They want to engage in that. And you made an important point here that asking for help is very hard for high potency people or successful people because, and men tend to be this way too. My wife has to say once a week to me, this isn't something for you to fix. I need you to listen. Okay. And and as a parent, you go into it, right, of two daughters trying to fix. I had full custody of them after court battles on the prior person mentioned. But when you talk about help, I did an episode that, gosh, it's probably been, well, I'm so screwed up on time now. I've been doing this for 3 years, but let's say 6 months ago. And I actually titled the episode, Asking for Help is Not a Weakness, It is a Strength. And if you're willing to put yourself out there, and this is to all the listeners, what you're hearing is a person that is a national championship and training of Olympic cyclers saying, the outcome will come, reach for help, find people that stretch you in different manners and things, and watch what happens. And when you talk about the outcomes, instead of focusing on the outcome but the process, I think that's true in selling as well. If you do all the other parts right, you build the relationship, you are a problem solver. You aren't trying to concentrate on the thing you want to sell somebody, but you are talking to them about improving their outcomes. The final stage, the close of the sale, whatever, happens very naturally. It's the easiest question in the entire endeavor. If you've done everything else right, that win or that successful engagement or relationship starts just naturally because the confidence and everything is there. Oh, what a great
Back
thing.
in my real estate days, I used to train the salespeople, and I had my own company. Obviously, I trained my salespeople, and the biggest gift I could give them was to realize that people buy from people, and they're gonna choose the product, unless it's like
that's right, unless it's a big discrepancy. Yeah, everybody's in the game with their products these days. That's right.
Yeah, it's right. Unless there's a big discrepancy between the product, or it's a cheap product that you can literally talk someone into buying because it's $50 and they're just like, oh, whatever, leave me alone.
Right. That's right.
When people are making substantial decisions, they're going to buy from the person they like the most.
They're going to have to deal with them, right? And especially in the service industry. What if it's something that you're constantly engaged with over a long period of time? It's not just a tangible item that sits on a shelf, but is a operating endeavor. You're right.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah. And we buy from people that we like. So the gift is to find the things that you have in common, meet that person there, get them to talk about themselves, and
Mhm.
genuinely be interested,
Be
not
a
just
good
take
active
it,
listener. That's right.
genuinely
That's
be
right. Care
interested.
about it. That's right. I used to say all the
And
time,
you,
go out and make a friend today. That's all you want to do is go make a friend.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you talked about the fixer thing, which is obviously interesting for us as high performers. And what I've noticed as I've got more successful, more knowledgeable, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more knowledge I have, the more I realize there is to learn. So at the end of my science and coaching career, I'm like, God, there's so much to learn. I could be an
Hmm.
expert in so many different facets of this sport. And I was reaching out to experts across the world and asking for their advice and support. And it was always interesting to me how often these people received that invitation gleefully. They wanted to talk about the thing that they were so interested in.
Hmm.
And they wanted to help because people genuinely, I think, most people want to help you. And what we do is we have this block of, oh, if I ask somebody else to help, that means I'm weak or I don't know it or they're going to
Exactly.
judge me.
Exactly.
Actually, when we reach out to people, they're flattered
It's a
typically,
whole
and even if
new
they're too
respect
busy to
level you've
help.
just opened up. That's
Yeah.
right. Because, first of all, they understand that you aren't narcissistic, you aren't
Yes.
self absorbed, and that you're willing to put your hand out to say, listen, I don't really get this yet. What I was going to say earlier when I in the technology business, and I went off on a tangent, is the world is moving so fast that what we're good at today is not what we need to be good at tomorrow. You got to be on a constant. Life is a learning journey if you're doing it right. Because what I'm selling today is a lot different than what I'd started doing in 1989 or what I was selling 3 months ago. My wife also tells me you can't say we anymore when you're talking about your former company. You don't work there anymore. I'm like, honey, that's going to be a hard one. That's 30 years, that's going to be a hard one. But it's right. And I always say, to your point, huge point, people are willing to help. Human nature is good. There's this social media and this 24-hour news cycle and everything, and if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news sells better on clicks than good news. Misleading headlines, all that. You can really get into this doldrums or the world is a cloudy, dark place. But there's all this enlightenment out there too, if you choose to go in that direction. There's a lot of positivity out there too. And
I think the
people are willing to
important
help.
word you use there, Brent, is choice. And
Oh,
people
yeah.
don't realize how much choice they have. And that's one of the first things that I really like to work with people, which is how to regulate their emotions so that they have choice. And there's a model that I've taken from a group called the Conscious Leadership Group,
Mm-hmm.
another group of coaches. And there's a guy there called Jim Dethmer, who I would have loved to have had as my dad. I listened to him on this podcast, and he's the reason I got into this coaching. I listened to this podcast. I didn't know such a thing as leadership coaching existed until
Mm-hmm.
I'd heard this podcast. And they have this model called above and below the line. And I really like the concept. So below the line is our
Blue and
emotive
red too, right?
response.
Is that blue and red?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So red below the line, black above the line,
Yeah.
and the below the line is our emotive response to any stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
And this is happening all the time. So the first part of that emotive response is our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn system. One of those gets activated. So we choose: are we going to get into a fight about this thing? Are we going to run away from it? Are we going to play dead? Or are we going to, what would have been, are we going to feed the threatening animal? And all of this goes back to our biological birth and how we had to cope with actual life and death situations. Unfortunately, our psychology hasn't kept pace with the lack of threat in the world now. And we see things like somebody texting us and saying, we need to talk. Our subconscious sees that as a life or death threat. So
Yep.
we have this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And then with that comes an emotion. And I like to make it super simple. So I work with 6 emotions: fear, joy, anger, sadness, interest, and disgust. And locating which of those emotions you're feeling tells you about your experience in life, right? Sadness, there's something I'm missing or I've lost,
Mm-hmm. There's a
I'm longing
longing. Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Fear typically is a future emotion. What do I need to be prepared for? What am I afraid might happen to
Mm-hmm.
me? What am I unsure of? What do I need to understand? Joy is an in-present emotion. right now. I'm present with other
Living in the
people. That's where
moment.
joy and
Yep.
happiness come from. And
Yep.
people think this happiness is this destination, right? If I make so much money, or I get a new car, or I get a wife, I'll be happy. And actually, happiness is a collection of in present moments where you're just there with the people around you, with whatever you're doing. That is what happiness is. And the more present moments you create for yourself, the more joy and happiness you have in your life. And in anger, which is a really tough one for guys, like fear and anger are the worst ones for
Yeah,
men,
that's
because
right.
we're told we cannot
Cannot
have
be
them,
that. Right.
right? Anger for a man is threatening, especially to women. And fear is don't be a pussy, don't be weak, you've got
Yep.
to stand up and don't show fear. But fear is a completely natural emotion. So a lot of my work is teaching people to reconnect with their emotions, understand their experience. And because I'm 6'2", former athlete, people understand I'm not doing this from some kind of wooey, like get in touch with your emotions, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's I look at your emotions as data. They are another part of the story of your life, telling you what you're experiencing, which gives you choice. So then above the line is we have this emotive response, we listen to it, we go, what is this telling me? And then moving above the line is, what is my cognitive response to that? How would I like to choose to be instead of just
Intellectual
reacting?
versus emotional response at that point. Right.
Exactly. And you
Mm-hmm.
can't get rid of, nor should you get rid of the emotional part. So that's the biggest mistake lots of people make, is they want to become unemotional. You cannot do this. This is hardwired to the human
That's right.
experience.
Robotics isn't in our DNA. That's correct.
No, you've got to move through it. You've got to acknowledge it and move through it. And it's not good or bad. There are not any good or bad emotions. We might have negative experiences that link to an
Connotations of
emotion.
it. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but the emotion itself, sadness is not bad. It just is. It tells us something. And when we accept that and we let these emotions pass through us, they tend to pass through us pretty quickly, 90 to 60 seconds. And when we don't, and when we stuff them down, ignore them, that's where we get depression. That's where we
Mm-hmm.
get kind of
Mm-hmm.
anger issues,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have a way of expressing and allowing our mind and body to act as
The
they
steam
should.
builds up on the pot, and suddenly there's too much steam in the pot, and that causes those
Exactly.
angered
Yeah.
responses. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect example, perfect metaphor for it. And we need to have these emotional responses. And little kids do. You watch little kids, boys and girls, very similar emotional responses. Then we tell girls that it's okay for them to have some emotions, but not all. And we tell boys it's not okay
Toughen
for them
it
to have
up.
any.
Yeah, spit on it, wipe it off.
You
Your knee
know,
will be fine. That's right.
even joy, like you can have joy when your sports team wins, but that's about it. You can't walk down the road as a little boy and look at the flowers and
No
go, oh, they're
smiling.
really
No
pretty.
smiling, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's
So
so this what's the gentleman's name again that did this coaching?
it's Jim Dethmer, and his company is called the Conscious Leadership Group. They do some great work.
Yeah. So, and the reason I ask again, so my former employer in the C-suite, our executive management team, and then they were doing some cohorts, are using this, and they asked me to join the cohort. They started this about 2 years ago, and they came to me, 8 months ago. Hey, you're in the next cohort, and I said, listen, I'm retiring. Give it to a younger leader. It's not that I don't want to participate. That wasn't it at all. I was thinking of the company. Don't waste the seat on the guy that's got. I won't even get through the cohort before I'm done.
Yeah.
So please go elsewhere. But we had this, and that's why I knew Below the Line Blue and those types of things, because it's a heavy conversation piece going on for a while. But they brought that in during COVID. They went into some leadership training on that, and all the feedback was very, very good. And I around this emotional and EQ is more important than IQ. Emotional intelligence.
Studies show
it's
a better indicator
that's
of how
right.
successful you will be in life.
That's
than your
exactly right.
Cognitive intelligence.
That's right. There's lots of people with 140 IQ. There really are. There's very few people that have 140 IQ, but and then can interact and understand and be willing to listen to others and not have a narcissistic approach in some of those things, right? Nose in the air, looking down their nose at people, less intelligent, whatever it might be. And especially in selling and leading, I won't say selling, in leading, your EQ needs to be very strong, because you're getting fed a lot of problems. Your emotion, what people look at leaders, I'm going down a road here, but they look at it and go, what an easy job. I'd love to be her. I'd love to be him, the leader. What they don't understand is all the hard work and the psychological baggage you carry trying to help others develop and learn And I always say you're the monkey trainer at the zoo. They come in and put their monkeys on your back every single day. And that requires a lot of emotional fortitude. You have to be able to separate from it and look at it intellectually instead of emotionally. Like right now, politics of the world is a very emotional sport. No one's looking at it intellectually any longer. The markets, same thing. Everything responds to the news.
We don't pick politicians intellectually. We pick them emotionally.
That's right.
That's the biggest thing. I mean,
that's right.
If we really wanted fully functioning societies and to optimize it, we would have politicians school, and you would have to go and learn, local governance, national governance, regional governance. You'd have to understand policy, and it wouldn't just be like, oh, I like that guy. It'd be like, oh, this is the most adept person to be able to do this.
The smartest guy in the room around the problems we're facing. And then you have the problem where all these other emotions or bad things that humans possess, desire for power, control, greed, envy, all these ugly emotions, unfortunately get tuned in. Term limits is the first one, and then you can't lobby. And you get those two in place, and we'll probably find some improvement.
The lobbying here is insane.
Oh, it's just incredible.
I think this is all connected back to leadership from the point of view, what we do is we give people titles that they don't deserve based on personality, not ability.
Yep.
And then we don't give them the training necessary. So if we think about leadership, typically you get promoted into a leadership position because you're a gifted individual contributor. So I think about the real estate business that I was in, and why did I keep getting promoted? I kept getting promoted because I was a really good salesman. However, there's a big difference between being a gifted salesperson and a gifted leader. And I was lucky that the first company I worked for was a large national firm. I had great training. My regional director was a very good leader who gave me great training. I still look at now and I'm very grateful for. Then I took this to the world of sport, and I saw in the world of sport that there was no training for coaches. So typically what happens in sport is you're a good sports person. Typically, the better you are at the sport, the more likely is you'll go into a coaching role. And they are completely opposite roles, especially for individual sports. In individual sport, you should be the selfless person in the room with everybody set up around you to help you perform at your highest. And everyone else's job is to make your life as easy as possible for you to do the work you need to do to perform as an athlete. And then you go into a coaching role and it's completely the opposite.
It's all about everybody else.
Pull everybody together for everyone but you. And your ego should be the smallest thing in the room, not the biggest thing in the room. And we do so little training of that. What we do is we train coaches and we talk to them about the game, the sport, how to analyze it, how to use data, how to study. And what we don't do is talk to them about how do you deal with another human being.
You give them tactical training.
How do you deal with your own?
That's right.
Exactly. How do you deal with your own emotions? How do you deal with your own desires to win? Which, if you're a really good coach, your team really shouldn't feel, because high performers are internally driven. It comes from them. We then add our external pressure onto it of like, oh, I want to win because I'm the coach and I need to win 7 titles. And that becomes crippling to people, especially younger people who don't kind of have
the plot
to protect themselves.
The first episode I did when I launched this, it was either the first or second, but I called it Why Be a Leader. And I talked specifically about this. In my industry, I gave an example. We had a gentleman that was in our Chicago office. This is in like 90, I got to think here. This is like a 96. And he was an unbelievable individual contributor. 2 years in a row, he'd come out, just gotten started, young guy, 22, 23 years old, salesman of the year out of Chicago. Next year, salesman of the year, some big transactions, a lot of good-sized transactions. And they immediately said, great individual contributor is going to be a great coach, and move him over. And there was no training, to your point exactly. And then what ends up happening is they are so dissatisfied as a coach, they don't like it because they're not winning, right? And that's what I talked about in the episode. If you want to be a leader because you want all the accolades, you want to be in on every deal, you want to be the winner, you don't go into leadership, because that's not what leadership is. That's individual contributor DNA.
Yeah,
that's not leadership DNA. And then what ended up happening is he failed as a leader because they didn't pass on any tools, right? We didn't understand this psychology as well in the 90s. It's all progressing very fast. Go to the 70s, it was even more degrading to to move from one to the other. And in a year, he was gone. So we double negative the company, lost our best contributor because we moved in a sales role, and then lost him completely because he didn't succeed there. And you think he went from hero to zero, as we say.
You see that all the time,
All
Brent. I used
the
to see that in the
time.
real estate world
Yeah.
all the time. Great salespeople would feel that they needed to be in a managerial role to further their career.
That's right. That's the natural
and
progression.
That was the
right.
path, instead of us saying, actually, this is the best for you. And I genuinely believe in things like real estate. The office manager should be paid less than your best salesperson.
Totally
and
agree.
The greatest position should be the lead salesperson, and that should have the most gravitas to it, because they're the people making you the money. And I would see exactly the same thing as you described. Wonderful salespeople moving to managerial positions that they weren't either emotionally or skill set or knowledge level equipped for, and then fail. And I remember I'm a big rugby fan, played rugby at school, as I said earlier, and the English rugby captain, I'm trying to remember his name now. I can see his face. Huge man.
Oh, God, yeah.
Martin Johnson. And the English team won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. Shortly afterwards, I think it was 2005, he became, after he retired, he became the coach of the England rugby team. He lasted 18 months, and it was an abject failure because he didn't go through the process of learning how to be a coach. And he's a smart guy. It's not like he's not a smart guy. He just didn't have that background in learning to be a coach. And what I've experienced a lot in my leadership roles, my managerial roles, and now in elite sport and with founders, is the people that weren't necessarily the best individual contributors or weren't necessarily the best athlete or sometimes didn't even do the sport. So the Dutch national sprint coach, a guy called Mehdi Cordy, has now moved on to
wasn't even a cyclist.
Wasn't even a cyclist. He was a sports scientist and data researcher who moved into coaching and just had a huge aptitude for it and learned. And that's why he came to me. He came to me to learn leadership, to learn how to look after personalities, to learn how to deal with conflict, learn how to deal with athletes' insecurities and help them. And when you come to it with that attitude of, I need to learn, as you said earlier, there is no bar to how good you can be. But when you come to it with, well, I'm a 6-time Olympic champion and I know everything there is about cycling, you don't understand how to be a coach because you think you know about cycling, but you don't understand that that's
the people side of it. That's not what you're here for at this point. Now it's inspiration to drive additional perspiration. It's not about knowing how to clip the shoes in the spokes.
You're full of the quotes, man, aren't you? You've got all of them tucked away.
I am an analogy guy. There is no doubt. And it's funny. I've carried a number of different nicknames in my life, but I think being a good leader and a good individual contributor too is you have to be a good storyteller, and I have always just thrived on that, right? And I think one of my not self-promoting here, but one of my strengths as a leader is I could pull in the audience, right? Get them to listen and boil it down to real simplistic thought processes. Don't make the science so difficult that nobody wants to go to chemistry class. Make the science understood, but make it real simple so people can then engage into it and not be intimidated by it. Because that's the other thing is people get real, you start saying words like, leadership is psychology based, and they start thinking, well, I'm not made for it because I don't understand psychology. No, you do. You just have never slowed down long enough to understand that's a psychological impact that you're dealing with at this moment, right? It's kind of stepping up away from the scene and looking down, and the vision starts to clear.
And the biggest mistake I see people make, and the surprise when they start working with me, is they come to me with a problem. I need to know how to deal with this person. And the first thing we do is we work on them.
Yep.
Because if you don't know yourself and you don't know your own triggers, what draws you into conflict, what it is that you're carrying around with you about your own personality and the way that you see the world and the lens that you're looking at the world through, you can't be effective with other people. You have to have that self-knowledge first to go, this is how I show up in conflict. This is what motivates me.
Yep.
This is the baggage I'm carrying around from my childhood that's now playing out in adulthood. And the story thing's fascinating to me. It's one of the reasons that humans succeeded is because we can talk to each other, we could tell stories,
Yep.
and that's what created communities, and that's
Yep.
why humans succeeded over other animals.
That's right. And you have to have a number of different stories. You have to be able to tell trust stories. You have to be able to tell experience stories. You have to be able to tell funny stories, humorous stories. Self-deprecating humor has been proven to be a psychological advantage as well, because it removes you from that narcissistic, or they think he or she thinks they're so much better than us. When you can self-deprecate and you can say, listen, I don't have all the answers, right? Look at me. I'm a big dummy too. I got lucky. I'm a kid from East Des Moines, Iowa, wrong side of the tracks, never been great at anything. Been above
one of the
average.
things that frustrates me, Brent, is when I hear this thing, I'm a self-made person or self-made man, because there is no such thing.
No, there is not.
The very first thing is there was luck. There was luck that your sperm was the one that impregnated
the fastest swimmer
that got you to be born, right? So that's luck number one. Then there's luck number two, that you made it through your childhood without dying, getting disease.
That's right. No car accidents, whatever. Right.
Where were you born? What parents were you born to? Then what school did you go to? And if you're lucky enough to go to a college, what college did you go to?
Who were your
All
professors?
Of these things have a
factor. Yeah, exactly.
All of these things have a factor before you even get into them, right? Who are the people around you that support you as a founder? Who are the people that lead in your different departments?
Who did you hire? Did you hire right? Exactly.
Yeah, Steve Jobs was not a self-made man. Steve Jobs was born in Silicon Valley in the absolute
perfect time, exactly,
of early technology. And yes, he had the intellect to take advantage of it. And there was a huge amount of luck in him being able to do it. There are Steve Jobs all over the world that were born in a rural village in India that had no
didn't get the right.
For that level of
That's
intellect.
right. That's right. Unbelievable good stuff. Well, so you came on today, and we're getting close to our time here, and I always want to kind of give an opening here towards the end. But, you've got this coaching business and things are going great. Unbelievably successful athlete and coaching at the highest levels, which is just awesome. But is there anything in particular, we've talked about the psychology of life and how to drive continuous improvement, et cetera. Is there anything you wanted to make sure that you got across to the listeners today? And first of all, before you answer that question, how can people find Lee Povey out there and engage you, leaders that would like to have your help on developing their skill set and their psychological strength and improvements? How do people find Lee, first of all?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. I like to make it super simple. So if you Google Lee Povey, you'll find me everywhere. My name is luckily unusual enough
that you don't have you don't have to be found on page 3.
No, I will come up on the first page. My website is leepovey.com. I'm Lee Povey on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. I really want to be of service to the world. So great. I have a free group on Instagram called the Founders Catalyst that you can come and ask questions and talk about leadership and meet other founders. One of the things that I've noticed in my journey is kind of the higher up the performance tree you go, the more lonely it is.
Yes.
As an elite sports coach, as I said, when I got to that national team level, I reached out to other national team coaches for advice. And it was interesting how they were all so receptive because they all felt the same thing. They were all lonely.
Yeah, nobody reaches out to them. Yeah.
Well, number one, there was that. And number two, the coaches below you kind of want your job and almost want to see you fail so that they can have it.
Interesting,
and there's not many people at your level and really understand sport at the level that you understand it. So you're trying to have these conversations and they're frustrating because people don't get it. And then you reach out to these other people in a similar position to you and you're like, oh, finally people get it. And it's exactly the same for founders. Most people don't understand what it's like to be a founder, what it's like to be able to see the answers to problems that most people can't see, and kind of how frustrating that can be when you're talking to people that don't get it. You feel lonely, and the responsibility that you feel to create things, and the responsibility you have for other people, and the weight of that. Most people don't get it. So that's why I create these communities. I have a 6-monthly cohort for founders where we get together and do really deep work. I do men's groups for a similar reason, because I think lots of men are struggling right now.
Yes.
Young guys don't really understand what it is to be a man. The social media version of it is hyper masculine that doesn't really appeal to most men. Or we have the opposite version of it, which is basically just be more like a woman, and that's not
terrible too. That's right.
Is.
That's right.
Yeah. So I like creating these spaces for people to come and explore who they are. and to figure that out. And in my men's groups, all men are different. Like all the men that come to my groups are different, and they have some similar challenges. And it's surprising how often they'll go, "Oh, I experienced that too," when a guy is sharing. But they're also different. There's no such thing as a real man. And I find it interesting when I see people post about, "Oh, be a real man." Like, what even does
What
that
does that
mean?
Right, right. Subjective at
I don't know
best.
what it means.
Subjective at
I've been
best.
in men's groups for 30 years and I've been leading them for 25 years, and I don't know what a real man is. It's just be yourself and be authentic.
That's right.
So I like to create experiences for that. And then lastly, my particular gift, and this is where the majority of my work is aimed, is I like working with scale-up companies with between 20 and 100 people, where I coach multiple people in the same company, typically the founder, the executive team, and key players. And I coach them on themselves, how they're showing up, what they're doing, the modeling that they're doing to other people, how they can become even better leaders, understand leadership more, how they understand themselves more, how they get more fulfilled, and then particularly how they work together more effectively. I love the complexity of that. It's unusual. Not many coaches can do this, where you coach multiple people in the same company without leaking secrets or details or giving away information. So I have a skill for not doing that. And it's really impactful work, and I love it. And I get to really help very bright people do really interesting and impactful things. And that's my purpose in life, is to help brilliant leaders be even more impactful and effective versions of themselves, so that they can benefit all of society.
Oh, what a great statement, a set of statements there. You've had just an incredible life, and it started out with challenges, and you stepped up to the plate and have been a leader for a long, long time. Your sports successes and your prowess in those across multiple sports is evident, and to be commended as well. But I really think you're onto something here. You can tell you care. You have a servant's attitude. I use that thought process a lot, I think, as well. Not trying to compare to you, but it resonates with me, is why I say that. Is because
that's where the fulfillment is.
Oh,
Brent.
it's just
I
so
see this
cool.
all the time. That's where the fulfillment in life is. And I typically have two types of clients. I have the young, brilliant founder, as I said, and I'm working in their organization and supporting them really understand themselves and leadership. And then my second most predominant type of client is the middle-aged, very successful man who has done everything society's told them they should do and is not happy. And it's because they haven't yet switched to that kind of service. I need to be of service in some way to get fulfillment. Human beings need a lot of connection. Men especially struggle with this because we're told our value is in achievements. That's the societal goal for men, is like, what did I achieve? Men get together and they talk about their achievements, and really it's the strength of the relationships that we create. And women know this, and women know this from a much younger age than men do, which is why typically when there's a divorce of a couple in their 50s and 60s, the woman is just fine, and in fact may actually be happier, and the man really struggles, and there's a high rate of midlife male suicide because men really struggle when they're not in relationships, because they haven't built the other relationships around them. So I love working with those guys, either individually and kind of helping them plan what's next and kind of what's the next part of their life. And you were talking about it earlier when you were in Asia, and you're talking about this. What do you do when you retire? And I don't believe in retirement. I love the Japanese philosophy about this of, you don't retire, you just go and do something else that's of use to your community.
That's right.
And I believe that I'll be doing this work until I die. I just get wiser. The more time I do it, I understand humans better. I get more valuable, and my hourly rate goes up, and the number of hours I work goes down.
That's right.
That's right.
That's the way.
I still expect to be doing this into my 70s and maybe 80s.
That's great.
I'm still cognitive functioning.
That's as long as you got it going on. Yeah. You talk about these relationships. I just got to tell this funny story. So my wife's grandmother just passed away. God bless her. She was 95 years old. And she lost her, and my mom's going to be 96. We were out to dinner last night, sharp as a tack. Wow. It's just crazy. But she lost her husband, 20, gosh, I'm going to be off on day. Let's say 25 years ago. And would ask her, you got any, before I even met my wife, any other relationships, talking about how you said when something happens, a divorce or whatever, women are typically fine. She had no interest in finding another man because she was perfectly content. And she goes, other men are looking for one of two things because they aren't good at relationships, a nurse or a purse. and I'm not going to be either. And it resonated with me, so it ties right in. But Lee, great conversation. Really did enjoy it. And you resonate with me. I'm sure you resonate with listeners. To all the listeners out there, again, it's Lee Povey, a leadership coach, not even former, but still cycling, I'm sure, and doing things now, doing the go-karts, but a coach of Olympians and national champions, somebody that can give a lot of good insight and give feedback to you. Please look him up. Lee, I appreciate you coming on. To the listeners out there, go out and check him out. Take what he gives to you to heart, and with that, you'll become awesome, and then you know the story. Keep that shit up. Talk next week, everybody.